Hi, welcome to the Flavor Adventure with Lawrenceburg Public Library for the month of June. I'm Carisa Bunten with 7th Street Gifts, a newly retired shopkeeper. Now I work out of a commercial kitchen on West 7th Street, making our herb blends, jellies, soaps, and all the things we've grown to love from 7th Street Gifts. So for the month of June, we've chosen rosemary, and that's one flavor, scent, plant, smell that we're all just kind of super accustomed to because it's just a classic, right? You can't go wrong. And so rosemary, in and of itself, the true botanical version that you can ingest and use for culinary and medicine, is Salvia rosmariniensis. And it's the herb or the spice of remembrance. So oftentimes that plant is planted in remembrance of people or things that have passed. And then also based on botanical evidence that it helps to trigger the memory and enhance blood flow to the brain. So even though that's not tied into the flavor, that's a pretty important thing to remember about rosemary. It is associated and it's like a first cousin to the mint family. So our peppermint and our spearmint that we talked about earlier in the month, these guys would meet one another at the family reunion. And rosemary is a little bit woodsier and shrubbier, and you could kind of see where it would be like a tougher, gnarlier version in the mint family, and it has those square stems. So it's, for that being said too, it's easy to find at nurseries and just your regular garden centers, and it generally comes back as a perennial, and it makes a really nice pot plant that can be brought in and kept alive on the windowsill over the winters as well. Now back to the flavor of rosemary, very intense, and a little goes a long way with rosemary in scent and in taste. So it's very earthy. And that would kind of lend itself to that woodsy nature of the plant that it comes from, how it kind of has like a barkiness. And then even a hint of a woodsy flavor, kind of like you would taste like oak in a fine bourbon or a wine, something like that. And then it does have subtle notes of pine. And I can tell and taste and smell a little bit of pininess in it. And the dried needles are sharp and prickly, similar to a pine needle. They're a little bit shorter and thicker, but the ones in your bag, you'll notice, are really, they can almost poke or prick you. And they kind of remind me of when you get a Christmas tree and the pine needles start to fall and they're almost sharp and sticky, they can kind of hurt. So that being said, the rosemary in your take-home kits for your taste of flavor and your culinary use is best ground finely when used dried. So you even just want to take like a mortar and pestle and just kind of crush it and bruise it a little bit. And in a perfect world, like a food processor or something like that, that would blend it into almost like a powder of sorts, like a cinnamon powder. Because it also will release and bruise a lot of the oils and scents that rosemary, when it's dried, lots of times I could smell it in your bags, but it kind of doesn't seem as potent. But once you break it and kind of bruise and crush those little needles, the flavor and scent really gets released. So it's important to basically bruise and crush your ground rosemary. And now, if you use it fresh, it's soft enough, and lots of times you'll see a little sprig of the top of a rosemary for like a fancy cocktail garnish, or paired with pork, or in like fancy magazines. They'll use it in place of like a parsley or a mint. So if you do have any growing in your yard, or you get some at the garden center and treat yourself, you could easily have this on like your windowsill or by your kitchen, and just pick little top plucks, kind of like the fresh pushes off, and use it fresh that way. It doesn't get that hard, needly, prickly texture or consistency until it's dried. And when it is dried, though, it has a nearly indefinite shelf life. So the rosemary that you have would last for a really, 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 really long time. I think that you would use it all before you would have to worry about it going bad. And again, this flavor is distinct, so there's really not many things you can interchange with the flavor of rosemary, where other things like mints and certain citruses or fruits, right, they're a little more similar. So with its distinction is a high potency, so it has a really strong and potent flavor. So with rosemary, a little goes a long way. It's not like a marjoram or even an oregano. It's more in the realm of like a strong basil or thyme, where I would start with less and then add more, because it can kind of overpower dishes and other blends, because it is such a potent flavor. And especially once you break those dry needles, they kind of bleed out that oil and that flavor, and they actually become a little bit stronger. So sort of keep that in mind. I would start maybe with like a teaspoon versus a tablespoon or a half a tablespoon, and then grind it up, give it a few minutes, taste it, and see if you need more. Because again, it's just a really intense flavor. And with that flavor, it does stand well on its own, but it, generally when we taste it in blends, it blends really well with like oregano, basil, and thyme, almost in equal parts. And then in the famous Herbe de Provence, the fancy French herbal blend that they kind of use as like their just go-to, like we would use like garlic, salt, and onion powder, it's lavender and rosemary, and then oftentimes a little bit of thyme or basil. It just sort of depends. So it's got a really good flavor that pairs well with other good flavors. So it kind of does better in a family than on its own. So kind of keep that in mind as well. Now what's going to be in your take-home kit for the Year of Flavor or the Flavor Adventure is a 1/4 ounce of certified organic dried rosemary leaf. And again, these to me look like little miniature pine needles, and they kind of almost knock and bump around. They're really hardy and they store really well. You could just keep them in the bag that they're brought to you in, or you could transfer them over into a jar. And even though that 1/4 ounce might not look like a whole lot in your big bag, again, it's such a potent, strong flavor, you really don't need any more than that. You could get many recipes from that 1/4 ounce in your take-home kit. In your handout too, one of the recipes I included is an herbed butter recipe. And it's really simple to make. We mostly have all this at home. It calls for a little bit of garlic, a little bit of lemon juice, a nice salt. If you have like a culinary salt, like a smoked salt or like a Celtic Gray, you can incorporate that in. But if it's just a regular old Morton table salt, that's fine too. And then it's just 2 teaspoons, which we all know how little of amount that is, of finely ground rosemary from your kits that you'll incorporate into your herbed butter. And then there are instructions. They're very simple, but to make it congeal and kind of go together the best, follow this. And then you can use that herbed butter right then to like saute a protein or top like a chicken or a fish. Or what I like to do is make it, use it for whatever recipe I'm using that night, even if it's just for like a simple French bread instead of garlic, just to kind of umph it up a little bit. And then I'll store it like even in an old yogurt container or a Tupperware or something like that with a tight fitting lid. And then store the herbed butter back in my refrigerator. So you can make kind of like an oversized batch of it and then use it throughout the week. And it's a really good way to just incorporate nice, strong, sort of different flavors really easily. So it just takes you about 20 or 30 minutes to make the butter once, and then you can use it for many numerous recipes throughout I would say the course of a couple weeks. You know, butter lasts a really long time. And then the flavors and proteins that rosemary pairs well with in the culinary, in the kitchen, it's very commonly used with lamb, goat and meat, and in the cheese, goat cheese and goat meat. And then it really pairs well with butters and creams. And so it's such a strong and intense flavor, but it doesn't have that acidicness that like a citrus would that would make a butter or cream curdle. It carries the flavors really well, like a creamed rosemary glaze, or the butter that we talked about, or even like a cream of mushroom soup, or like a clam chowder, like a milk-based creamy soup. You can put a little bit of rosemary dried or fresh in there, and it just pairs really well and kind of brings your dish up to next level. And then this does not have anything to do with the incredible flavor of rosemary, but I can't talk about it, rosemary, this cool plant, without letting you know that it has a reputed hair growth stimulant. So that's also just to drink it in as a tea, like a rosemary tea, or incorporate it into your cooking. Or if you're using your memory brain booster, right? Because since it's the herb of remembrance and it has reputed brain health blends, you could blend it with ginkgo, godo, rosemary, and make like a brain boosting tea or tincture. But you can also take the dried rosemary and just make a really strong tisane in water or apple cider vinegar. You know your hair type better. And do it as a rinse, like a weekly rinse. And it really, really does seem to help people grow hair faster and hold on to the hair that they have. So whether you use it externally as a hair rinse or even a little bit of the essential oil carried in like a jojoba, but mostly ingested into your body, it's a folk tale. I don't have any proof other than just real life experience and years of working at the shop and making rosemary hair oil and rosemary hair growth teas. We would blend it with nettle, peppermint, rosemary, and nettle, and it would help people's hair grow. So just throwing that out there. If anybody's looking for that or is trying to get like their hairline to fill in a little bit better or something like that, I would really give the rosemary a team try and just eat and drink the heck out of it because it can't hurt you. So again, in conclusion, for the month of June in the Flavor Adventure with the Lawrenceburg Public Library and myself, Carisa Bunten with 7th Street Gifts, rosemary is the herb or spice of remembrance. Remember, it's an herb when it's fresh cut. It's a spice when it's dry. So your bag is a spice. If you cut it from your garden and top a cocktail or a dish with it, it would be an herb. And it's the herb of remembrance because it's often associated with memory and brain health. And again, a really easy herbal blend is ginkgo, godo, and rosemary for a typical brain boosting blend. Back to the flavor, it's earthy and woodsy, subtle notes of pine, and it's a very distinct and strong, potent flavor. So I would really like you to start with less versus more and work it into your kitchen, and you're going to really enjoy it. And your kit's got the 1/4 ounce of certified organic dried rosemary. Remember to bruise and grind it up because it is dried and you need to crush and release those herbs or those oils and kind of reinvigorate the flavor. And just quick pairings, lamb, goat, cheese, and then our other classic herbs and garden spices, lavender, basil, and thyme. So rosemary, Salvia rosmariniensis, the officinalis, the Flavor Adventure for June. Enjoy your kit. Put something on the grill. Make a butter or maybe even a culinary salt and let us know how it goes. Thanks a lot.